Welcome to You Sip, I Sip, a weekly podcast with Northern Lights Winery founder Doug Bell, exploring the experiences from leaders in business, social media, and family. Now here's this week's exceptional guest.
Welcome to You Sip, I Sip. My name's Doug Bell, the host of the podcast. I'm here with Tim Bennett, a good friend, also the executive director for Scouts Canada. One of the cool things about doing this podcast is you get a chance to talk to people in more depth than you've ever had an opportunity to before. And Tim and I have known each other for, probably been 10 years or more. We've had an opportunity to go side by side to work together to see how each other's careers have evolved over the last few years. And so it's a real privilege that I get a chance to talk to you today. Thank you for coming in.
Oh, thank you so much. And thanks for the glass of wine. It's always good to chat and connect.
Well, wine always helps loosen up those tongues a little bit. We're drinking some Seduction wine today, the Strawberry Rhubarb, Canada's favorite fruit wine. It's pretty awesome. But even more awesome, I think, is your story, because you're someone who really cares about your community. You've done so much work for kids over the years, whether it's for the school district or Big Brothers, which everyone has, seen you because you've been such a visible figure over the years. And now you have a new role as well, which is really great. But tell us, is there something about kind of your history or when you were younger that kind of instigated this love for children and helping people?
Well, I think it's interesting in the fact that, I'll start with, growing up, there's only a 15-year age difference between me and my parents. So, growing up, I was quite fortunate to have some pretty amazing mentors and family in my life who helped me just to grow and become who I am. So, that was a big part of my journey around mentoring is, these people stepped up at a really early age so that my parents could finish high school, could go to college. And so for me, it was one of those activities was scouting. So scouting really introduced me to the fact that you are part of a community, that you are there more than just, for you and your family. And I had the opportunity to get involved in the community in many different ways. And if I kind of look at, that first real opportunity where for me it was, maybe that aha moment, I was at that point 13 and was sitting having dinner with my grandparents, and we were chatting, and I had made a joke, looking in the Citizen about all of the different Christmas activities that were planned for seniors in our community. And they had said, well, we don't go to those. Those are for seniors who live in seniors' homes or in long-term care facilities. And, I'd kind of make a joke of, oh, that's not fair. Like, let's fix that. And then I, stopped and thought about, well, like, how do you fix that? How can you create change? And at that point, I had some really great friends who I pitched the idea to them, like, let's run a Christmas dinner. And, I think they were probably just as crazy as I was and said, like, yeah, let's figure out how to make this happen. And we went to, our parents and to, at that point, one of my scout leaders and one of my good friends was in cadets, and we went to talk to like the adult mentors in our life. And I think everyone just kind of was like, that whole, yeah, that's a great idea. Like, let's see, go ahead and give it a try. Probably not actually thinking that anything would happen. And we started putting this together. And again, in hindsight, and I'm spending, now almost 20 years doing fundraising, I'm shocked that this actually came together. But the community stepped up and gave this group of 14-year-olds probably the equivalent of almost $50,000 of cash and items to pull off this Christmas seniors dinner. And we had 125 seniors come to St. Giles Church. We had volunteers who stepped up and cooked this 3-course gourmet Christmas dinner. my mom made handmade corsages or boutonnieres for every guest who came. Everyone left with a Christmas gift. And then, like, I even remember, like, the Spruce King stepped up and donated their bus to pick up seniors from their homes so that anyone who wanted to attend had the opportunity to attend. And, for me, that was really, I think, that eye-opening moment of, like, it only takes an idea. And then, when you have that idea and that spark, all of a sudden the community can come together and rally behind. And for me, that was really the eye opener of just how powerful the Prince George community is, right? They stepped up. And again, in hindsight, they wrote very large checks to this 14-year-old to trust that I was going to run this dinner. And, the dinner carried on for 10 years. Around the year 5 mark, we kind of passed it off in the day-to-day operations aspect of it to the next group, next generation of scouts coming up. And I moved from organizer to dishwasher. And that was probably again, great highlight. But it was just, a pretty incredible thing to see how the community came together. That was actually the first time I met Shirley Bond, as she volunteered to come wash dishes at each of the dinners. And it was a power of community. And at that young age, it really just showed me how, that one idea can really rally a community, and that it is possible to create change, right? You always hear from people that, that sounds like a great idea, but it will never work. And this was just kind of proof that sometimes those great ideas can work if you put in a little bit of energy and rally that team behind you.
They say people rally around people, not necessarily around ideas. Why do you think you were able to get so much confidence from these people who were writing you large checks at such a young age where you had never done it before? What was it that you were doing at that age?
I wish I knew. Like, I wish I could say that it was this one thing. And I think for me, it's always, I think, trying to be genuine, probably one of those lessons that I learned from Scouts was, to always be prepared and to make sure that, when I'm going in to meet with partners and meet with community members, it's, this is what we want to do, and this is how we're going to do it. And I may not always have the answers, and I learned a lot from those meetings. One of the things I probably had to learn early on was also how to take no as an answer. And even to this day, people saying no still sucks, but it's part of life. And I think part of it is just, again, it's at being genuine. It's at being approachable. And I think also a big part of it is just making sure that you're living up to what you say you live up to. So when I'm meeting with these partners, it's, this is what we want to do. This is what we're able to, offer you in return. And at the end of the day, if you can build that trust with the donor, then the next year when you go back, they are going to be just as eager to get involved and support. And I think it is one of those things where in year 1, it was probably a bigger story than I ever thought it was going to be. I remember BCTV flew up a news crew to cover the story. And again, as a 14-year-old, I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And it was really just this community hype around this event. And at the end of the day, I think the most rewarding part of it was 5 years in, seeing the next generation of youth say, this is really cool. I want to take the lead. I want to be involved. And being able to pass it along was great. And being able to see, new ideas and new energy come to it. And at the end, by the time we kind of put an end to the event, it originally happened because just before the planning would have started, my grandmother passed away. And we as a family just weren't in a position to take the lead on it. And we originally thought, let's take the year off. And then when we went to start looking at restarting the event, we realized that there wasn't the same need in the community anymore. We look at, and I've had this conversation. We look at the senior tea that Shirley organizes at the Civic Center. We look at the various other events that are now happening in the community. And, at the end of the day, we achieved our mission of creating a memorable Christmas experience for seniors because there wasn't anything else there. So did we need to come in and compete with the resources? Did we need to come in back in and do what we were doing? Or could we back away and allow the community to pick up where we had left off? And again, that's just the power of community, of stepping up and seeing a need and being able to fill that.
Over the time that we've had this podcast we've had the opportunity to interview quite a few change makers, people who have taken ideas and brought it to fruition, both on the event side and, changing people's lives. I think everybody has like a good heart and they want to do things for others, but also part of being selfless is also being very selfish, right? We really have to understand what it is that makes us tick and why we want to do something. I know, over time where I've volunteered for a variety of groups or I've helped fundraise, often, people say thank you and you have a great heart for doing this, but in a way, it's my ego that's kind of being built because, people are kind of recognizing these different things that are making a positive impact to the community. And I would say that's a very good thing. Have you ever really spent time self-reflecting on that, first event and why you did it and how you can translate that into kids today that maybe, maybe it's your kids or people, or for parents who are listening, how can they mentor those young people to step up and be selfish and selfless at the same time?
Yeah, I think, when I looked at, so I will say when the first dinner really became the project that I submitted for my Chief Scout Award, right? When the Chief Scout Award is the highest honor that you can be awarded as a youth member as part of the scouting troop. And in addition to a lot of other work, you have to submit a big community service project. So for me, that's that selfish end of things this is an opportunity for me to achieve kind of my highest award honor. And this is a project like, how do you kill two birds with one stone? And I think, as I look and continue on with the work, that I do in the community, I think it's important to recognize that there's always that, personal benefit that people get from getting involved in the community. For me, as I look at why I do what I do, I think part of it is, as I mentioned, growing up, if I was to look at all of the research out there and, spending the time doing the work I do, I spend a lot of time looking at research and data. The data should show that I shouldn't be where I am today, right? Being an Indigenous male, growing up with teen parents, growing up well below the poverty line, like those are all indications that I should not be successful today. And looking at that and looking at the fact that I don't, growing up, I didn't see myself represented in community. I'm like, I need to feel that I want to do what I do to show my kids and show younger generations that these things are possible. And sometimes it is like, sometimes I get myself into trouble because I speak up and volunteer because I just know that something needs to happen. That is at the end of the day how I ended up deciding to run for trustee, because I got loud and vocal during the school closure process because I was a volleyball coach and I didn't think it made sense to amalgamate a junior high school into PGSS because it would limit the opportunities for kids to participate in extracurricular. And I was not a great high school student. Like, my report cards would tell you differently. And I mean, I can say this now because it's well past high school. But like, I remember like grade 11 English, we were doing a book report on Lord of the Flies. I don't think I actually opened the page in the book. Like, I sat there, I listened to what people talked about in class. I like skimmed Cole's notes, fudged my way through a book report. And, you know, got a B and was happy with that. Like, I wasn't the best, you know, academic student. I really loved my time in high school because of those extracurriculars, because of, you know, I played trombone in band, and I was involved in drama, and, you know, coached and refed and played volleyball after school. Like, it was really those extracurriculars that kept me motivated to go to school every day. And when you all of a sudden, when I felt that those opportunities were going to be missed, is how do you keep those students engaged? So I got very vocal. I remember standing up in front of the Board of Education at the time, talking to them about why they shouldn't close Lakewood Junior. And at the end of the day, the decision was made, and I was upset and felt that process wasn't given. And then I was like, okay, well, if I wanted to create change and wanted things to be done differently, then I should put my name on the ballot. And at that point, I was 25. I was this 25-year-old young guy who had really no plans of getting elected. And then the community felt differently. And again, that's kind of helped shape me into who I am today, and learned incredibly a lot through that journey and experience of my life.
So how many years did you serve as a trustee on the school district?
So I served 3 terms. So I was first elected in 2011. And then I left the school board in this last election, so 2021. So like it was about 11 years, 12 kind of school years. Served as board. So I was vice chair for 4 of those years, and I was board chair for 4 of those years. And was very fortunate, again, through the opportunities that I had through my time as a trustee, not only here as a district, but again, one of those things that nobody put up their hand, and it was an awkward silence. So I said, fine, if no one is going to do it, I'll do it. So I spent 3 years chairing what's called the Northern Interior branch, but it's the representatives of its trustees from all across Northern BC. So I was their president of our kind of branch for 3 years, and then was elected by my colleagues to sit on the BC School Trustee Association Board of Directors. So I was a director for 4 years, and then vice president for 1. And again, that opened my eyes to the whole world of the inner workings of the ministry, getting to represent trustees on the COVID-19 Health and Safety Committee provincially was, I think, a real eye-opener, right? BC was one of the only jurisdictions where schools really didn't close over COVID. And of course, COVID was such a divisive topic, not just in education, but in society, that, you know, sitting on that committee was a really interesting experience. And I learned more, I think, about, you know, the policies and health and safety requirements of a school district than I ever thought I was going to learn.
So thinking about, you know, you're a young guy, 25 years old, who steps onto, you know, a school district trustee position. It must have been a little bit surreal, but also there must have been some like maturation, or like you must have gotten a lot more mature really, really fast. Not saying you weren't prior to that, but I mean, it's always different when you're sitting behind the desk that's actually making decisions. Sometimes decisions that you don't want to make that are made for in the best interest of this, you know, the scenario that you have around you. How did you kind of grow into that role? And were there some early decisions that were made that kind of really opened your eyes to how much more difficult it was going to be than you thought?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the funny thing is I wasn't actually nervous at all during the campaign. now that I've run a few campaigns, like I will say the easiest one to always go through is your first one, because you really have no idea how the system works. You don't have a record to stand on, and I'm not trying to make that sound flippant, but when you run for the first time, you can be raw and you can share your ideas. And again, like during the campaign, like as I said, I wasn't nervous. And then I remember driving to the inaugural meeting and hearing on the radio that there was a protest set up at the board office because the District Teachers Association and the district, in turn, I soon learned the Provincial Bargaining Association and the provincial government, were in a very heated bargaining session. And there was a protest about the state of the bargaining. And I remember driving and being like, what have I gotten myself into? Like, that was probably the most nervous I ever was that drive to the board office, where all of a sudden it kind of sunk in like.
Yeah. And you had no, context for what was going on, maybe a little bit, but you hadn't been a part of any of the discussions. You weren't really a part of the bargaining process at that point. It was probably very difficult to see that you might empathize with one side or the other.
Yeah.
Yet you are now in a position where you have to represent the school district and its interests.
Yeah, it was a wild experience, right? And even at that point, my wife was just finishing the teaching program and just getting a job at the district. So, quickly learning around conflicts of interest. And, while I can even have an opinion, I'm not part of that process, right? And, it was a real interesting experience. And being, in 2011, there were 5 new trustees elected out of a board of 7. So that was following kind of the school closure process. So Cheryl Warrington and Trish Bella were the only 2 incumbents elected, and there were 5 of us who were brand new. So it wasn't even that we could slow down and enjoy an onboarding experience. And then like there was really a need and expectation that we dove into the work right away. And I ended up chairing policy and governance right off the get-go. So the question around, was there divisive, situations? And I would say, I remember our first kind of non-inaugural public board meeting, we had a very large delegation of students and staff who came to present to the district about the needs of a standalone LGBTQ policy. And, we as a board listen, I made copious notes. We go to policy and governance, and there was a big conversation about, do we need a standalone policy? And do we, what are the benefits? How is this going to be different than what policies we currently have in place? Why do we need a standalone policy? And there was a rigorous debate back and forth, and at the end of the day, the decision was made that the district felt that the policies that we had in place were sufficient to cover what was being asked.
Yeah, I want to stop you for a sec, because I think this is really interesting for probably many people who are listening that don't understand this. So the wording that you're using is the district felt. Now, that doesn't mean that you felt, it doesn't mean that you didn't feel. But when you get into a room, and often you're having these meetings in camera, they say, or you're having meetings essentially that are not visible to the public, that it includes private information about like staff or about a situation that maybe wouldn't be made public, and you're using this to make a decision. And there is a group of 7 people that are making it, and regardless of where you stand, if you vote against or for, once that decision is made, you kind of have to support it.
Yeah. So the district's, like the Board of Education is a corporate board, right? So at the end of the day, and at that point, policy and governance was considered an in-camera committee. So it was 3 trustees and a couple staff members who made recommendations back to the board. Because of the nature of this conversation, more of the board was invited to participate. But you're right. Like once those decisions were made, regardless if you voted against it or for it, it is your responsibility to support the decision of the board. And I mean, a more recent example of that would be around the school renaming process that happened in 2020, when we ended up with Shasti Kelly Road. That could be a whole other conversation, but it is. So the board made the decision that we didn't need a policy, and as chair of policy and governance, I was the one speaking to that decision. And I mean, I think I'm incredibly thankful for with that process was a time that students, parents, and staff came to have a very respectful conversation about why we were wrong. For the next couple months following, we had numerous conversations with stakeholders who pointed out the benefits of why a standalone policy was important and where the current policies were really lacking. And at the end of the day, the board decided to revise the current position and worked with the stakeholders to develop a standalone LGBTQ, or at that point it was reworded to SOGI, sexual orientation, gender identity, policy, which then became the framework for many other standalone policies across the province, because it was developed in consultation with those in which the policy impacted the most. But that has probably been that was probably a lesson learned really early, is the power of consultation, but also that lesson of where the Tim as a trustee started and ended, and then where Tim, the spokesperson of, at that point, the committee, started and ended. Mm-hmm. And that is a tough, as somebody at the table, that can be a tough conversation where you may not necessarily fully support what the final decision was, but you kind of have to bite your tongue and support the decision of the corporate identity. And again, as I kind of joked about, that's a lesson that comes back to bite you, a few times over the years, where you may not always agree, or you may agree in partially, but once the decision is made, that's your time to be vocal, is when you're at the table debating.
Yeah. I mean, your story resonates with me so much because, I lived through a lot of that with my father when he was in politics, and, as a member of the Legislative Assembly of British Columbia and MLA for the province. I remember when he first ran, he ran on the principles of, I'm a business person, not a politician. I remember him at his first press conference where he announced that he was running, and he took he said he was handing in his grill spatula for a pen, and he wanted to make a difference. And there was so much motivation and intrinsically in him to make a difference. And then once he got in and was elected as an official, actually having to listen to all the diverse opinions, try to kind of find consensus. And sometimes even at the end of that, you can't find consensus with the stakeholders, and you end up, being criticized very heavily for decisions that were made. As a matter of fact, it didn't just stand, that he would be criticized. Often, our businesses would be attacked for years, where we would see picketers outside our businesses because of decisions that were made by his government that he was supporting. And I think many of the decisions he agreed with, and some of them maybe he didn't. But at the end of the day, it was affecting 100 people that worked for us at the time. And they had to go through that picket line because his decisions he made. Luckily and thankfully, that wasn't often the case, but certainly it was over the years. And so probably your character has even, been attacked at times when you know that's not you and it's not the person you want to be. So what kind of motivates somebody like you to not just do that, but now you've stepped into another role, and continue to be in the public eye?
Yeah, and it is like, I knew what I was signing up for. And I mean, I will say you can never prepare yourself for that type of criticism. Um I've I've been now almost 12 years actively involved in public service. As I did the math, like it resulted in probably a bigger percentage of my life than I care to admit. It's crazy how much even public, serving publicly has changed in 12 years. And I remember, even hearing an interview CKPG did with Murray Krause as he was transitioning out of his life on city council, and talked about how much it changed. And I mean, I think social media, as much as I love it and spend too much of my time on it, has also become a dangerous thing, because it provides yet another opportunity for not only that criticism, but you're kind of always on, right? You're always, when I first was elected as a trustee, like I could easily turn my phone off at night and have a quiet night where no one could get hold of me. Now it's so easy to get messages at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m, or, sitting at dinner and you get a phone call or a Facebook message. And it is that also, like, I mean, I'm really bad at setting those boundaries. So it's, how do I respond right away? Maybe not at 2 a.m. unless I'm up with a kid, but it's, it has created a little bit of a different world. And again, I knew what I was signing up for in terms of being in the public eye and the criticism that comes with it. I think what I could never prepare myself for, and where I think it is probably incredibly unfair, is when people take that anger at me and direct it towards my wife, my kids, my family or friends. And unfortunately, you're hearing more and more of those stories from from politicians across the country, or, across the world, where, their families didn't necessarily sign up for that criticism. And, I can think of examples, especially during the public consultation regarding Shastee Kelly Road, where, it wasn't uncommon for people to be yelling at my wife or kids as they're going into the mall or getting picked up from school. And again, I think people can be mad at me as the politician, as the decision maker, for, my record and things that I'm saying or doing at the table. But families don't sign up for that. And I hope that as a society, we can get to that place where we can once again kind of draw that line. Like, and again, I'm sure it's happened a lot over the years, but I feel like it is escalating more and more, especially now as we see, I think these last few years, the world has just become a lot more politically charged, and people feel maybe more confident or more empowered to say things that they may never have said before. And, I hope that we can get back to that little bit of that level of decorum in terms of, how we're treating those who may be, connected to those of us who serve.
For sure. But there's a lot of great things that come with it as well. So what's kind of the biggest like highlights that you've seen and drives you to continue to, to serve the public?
I think if I reflect back on my time as a trustee, for me, it was always getting into the schools to see the work that is happening in our buildings each and every day. And I know that the public education system and the school district don't always, have the best narrative when it comes to the work that's happening in our buildings. As I say that, as a parent, as a former trustee, I can assure people that there's great learning happening in our buildings, and the education as a whole is changing. And whether it's attending, a grade 12 capstone presentation where they're talking about, the work that they're getting ready to embark on, attending the regional science fairs where students are working on presentations that, win gold and platinum medals at a national science fair in the areas of healthcare and forestry, or going and watching a kindergarten and grade 1 like Christmas concert where just the confidence of those kids up on stage, like it has been, that's a work that's really truly rewarding, and knowing that I play a small role in helping that success, I think is incredibly rewarding. And as I continue on my journey now with, my role as a city councillor, it is just my opportunity to get out and meet people in the community, attend events, be that cheerleader for Prince George. Our community has so many great things to offer that, again, I feel like we don't talk enough about. And we have issues that, of course, we're working on and that we need to try to address. But at the same point, like we need to be doing a better job showcasing what our community has to offer. And again, if I can play a role in helping shape a stronger community, not just for my kids, but for future generations, and for, everyone else in the community, I think that is incredibly important. When I decided to run for city council this time, it was not a decision I made lightly. But again, I didn't see myself represented at the table. At that point I had 4 young kids who, and, understanding the challenges of trying to get your kids into swimming lessons or gymnastics or, those activities. And while I'm on my own kind of cultural journey as well, learning more about, my culture and my roots. We never self-identified as an Indigenous growing up. It was for various reasons, and part of it is probably due to, some of the struggles that Indigenous students face in the public education system. So we never self-identified as a family growing up. It's only been within the last, since my grandmother passed away and my mom got connected with the nation, and we were able to start learning a bit more about our culture, being able to do that learning alongside my kids who are much more involved in Indigenous programming in their school has been a real eye-opener as well. So, it was kind of all of that was like, I felt like I had a voice that could contribute to our community. I felt that it was time for some new voices to be around the school district table. And kind of all of those reasons made me decide that I wasn't done serving, but it was time for me to try to lend my voice to a different avenue. And just very fortunate to be able to have that opportunity still.
You definitely inspire a lot of people who have had similar backgrounds and grew up in different situations that maybe they were disadvantaged and have been able to pull themselves out. So what a message do you try and leave for families or individuals who are struggling, who are trying to get through the day-to-day, who, have not had the best opportunities growing up to be able to step up and not just, serve themselves and their family and their community, but, really thrive and improve upon their situation better than they could have ever expected?
I think, if I could leave one message with those families and with those youth is really I think first off is there are opportunities and supports out there. Like, I know that there's a large percentage of our population who are really struggling and don't want to come out and share that they're struggling. And there are I think resources out there to help get kids involved in activities, whether it's scouts or cadets or sports. There are supports that are offered in our buildings. There are opportunities, I think, for families to, again, try to get those different opportunities for, and whether it's, and I'm trying to think, like, there's, I guess the long and short of it is there are supports out there, and while yes, there may be wait lists for some, I think it's incredibly important that you start that conversation, you reach out for help, because spending most of my career in the human social services sector, I can say that there's also a perception in the community that wait lists are a lot longer than they truly are. Spending my time with Big Brothers Big Sisters, we quite often heard, well, it's a 3-year wait list. And it's, well, actually, no, we can get some of your kids in programming right away. So it's how do we as a community break down some of those historical rumors that may be in place around wait lists. And I'm not trying to minimize and say that there aren't wait lists at organizations. There absolutely are. There's a lot of organizations that could use additional funding and support to be able to expand capacity. But I think it is, if you are struggling, reaching out and asking for support, I think is an important first step, because I know, for my, growing up is we quite often wouldn't talk about the supports that we could benefit from. And if it wasn't for the opportunity to get some support for me to be able to do something like Scouts, where I could get that support in a peer way, that peer support, that mentorship from some amazing Scout leaders, that really helped shape who I am today. And I also, for any youth who are listening, like, I think if you have a big idea, like, don't be afraid to enact on it. Like, it is one of those things where sometimes those crazy ideas that you think are crazy are actually probably secretly quite brilliant. And with some hard work and some support, you're truly going to be able to create something that is going to create change. Like, everything that's happening in our world today probably started with somebody's crazy idea. And at the end of the day, you're going to hopefully be able to create something that is truly going to be changing for our community.
That's such a great message. Thank you so much. Shoot for the moon, or shoot for the stars, and worst case scenario, maybe you'll end up on the moon. I think that's very important and powerful for many people. I could talk to you all day. This has been such a great episode. And I've just got a question on where people can find you in terms of social media, if they'd like to keep in touch or find out more about what you're doing.
Yeah. So I am, as I think I joked earlier, I spend too much time on social media. So you can, I'm on Facebook. So I have both my personal page and my council page are just at Tim Bennett. I spend, again, probably too much time on Twitter. So Twitter and Instagram are at TIBEN12. And I am trying to branch into the world of TikTok. I kicked off for my campaign. So that is TIBEN.12. Please feel free to reach out. Or if you visit timbennett.ca, there's links to all of my different platforms on my webpage.
That's fantastic. We're going to throw those in the show notes below. And Tim, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a great conversation. And for everyone else listening, can't wait to see you again on You Sip, I Sip. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to You Sip, I Sip. Please hit the 5-star rating and leave us a review. If you'd like to learn more about Northern Lights Winery, text us at 604-670-4046 or visit us on social media at Northern Lights Winery.